The cornfield invasion. By late July, Pine Hollow was a steam pot of humidity and cicadas. The kind of heat that makes fence paint smell like whiskey and asphalt shimmer like bad memories. Grandpa Ray had decided that year he'd rather grow something worth biting than argue with the HOA again. So behind our fence, he tilled 3 neat rows of sweet corn and 1 row of tomatoes that glowed like warning lights. We called it Bennett's Acre, though it wasn't much bigger than a tennis court. Still, Grandpa treated it like farmland. He'd built a scarecrow that looked suspiciously like his old shop teacher, hat and all. Every morning he'd walk the perimeter with a mug of coffee, muttering to the soil like it owed him back rent. That peace lasted exactly 9 days. On the 10th morning, around 6:45, a convoy of golf carts painted HOA beige came trundling down the access lane like a parade of authority. Sloan Mercer had been replaced, officially retired for wellness reasons, but her spirit apparently franchised itself. The new president, a wiry man named Trent Hubble, wore mirrored shades and the kind of enthusiasm you only get from petty power and podcasts about leadership. Behind him rolled 3 other volunteers in neon vests. Their mission, community land use verification. Translation, they wanted to measure Grandpa's corn. I was halfway through buttering toast when I heard tires crunch over gravel and Grandpa mutter, "Well, that didn't take long." He set his mug down like a gavel and stood. By the time we reached the gate, Trent was already waving a clipboard. "Mr. Bennett, Section 9A clearly prohibits non-ornamental agriculture within subdivision boundaries. These," he gestured at the corn stalks, "constitute a violation." Grandpa leaned on the rail. "You telling me corn's a crime now?" "Not a crime, sir, a compliance issue." "Uh-huh. You ever eat compliance with butter?" I got a snicker from one of the volunteers, quickly smothered when Trent shot him a glare. He continued, "We'll be conducting a measurement survey and photographic documentation." Grandpa didn't move. "You step 1 foot past that line, you're on private property." "Sir, this area falls under communal visual jurisdiction." "Buddy," Grandpa said, "if you can't see it from your porch, it's none of your business." But Trent was one of those men who mistook stubbornness for virtue. He signaled his crew, and before Grandpa could say more, 2 carts veered right through the side gate and straight into the corn rows, stalks snapping under the tires like gunfire. Grandpa's jaw flexed. "That's enough," he said softly, the kind of tone that made even dogs reconsider barking. He turned back toward the shed, the one that always smelled like cedar, solder, and half-finished inventions, and disappeared inside. By the time the golf carts reached the tomato line, there was a soft hum from the field's edge. Not loud, just that faint, low electric promise of something about to remember the rules. Grandpa reappeared with his thumb on a little gray remote. He didn't smile, not exactly. More like the ghost of satisfaction passed through him. "Let's see who's grounded," he said, and flipped the switch. The wire trap. What happened next wasn't fireworks. It was poetry in static. A sharp crack pop rolled through the rows, followed by a chorus of startled yelps that could have passed for a 4th of July rehearsal. The first golf cart froze mid-turn, headlights flickering, its driver jerking back like he'd just been kissed by invisible lightning. The second cart plowed straight into a scarecrow, took a corn stalk to the face, and stalled with a sad little whine. "Good grief," Trent shouted, hopping out and waving his clipboard like it could block electricity. What did you do, Bennett?" Grandpa stood on our side of the fence, arms crossed, that small, satisfied stillness about him. "Installed a low-voltage deterrent grid. Keeps raccoons and bureaucrats from nesting where they shouldn't." You wired your field?" "Grounded and bonded," Grandpa said. "Legal voltage under the livestock threshold. I even use copper reclaimed from an old well pump. Vintage stuff. You boys oughta thank me for the craftsmanship." Trent's face reddened to HOA pink. "This is assault," he barked, just as one of his volunteers tried to dismount and got a mild zap off the cart's metal side. The man leapt a good 2 feet and landed in the corn, muttering words not approved by community guidelines. I bit my lip to keep from laughing, but Grandpa didn't bother. "Assault's when you aim to hurt," he said. "This here's education. Teaches respect for property lines." Trent puffed himself taller, clipboard trembling like a flag in the wind. You'll be hearing from legal counsel. Hope they bring sunscreen, Grandpa said. It's a long walk through jurisdictional gray area. One of the other volunteers, a young woman named Cora from the next cul-de-sac, peeked out from a cart. Mr. Hubble, she whispered, the tires are smoking. Sure enough, both carts sat steaming in the July sun, every bit of static discharge running its course through the damp earth. The air smelled faintly of ozone and cooked grass. Not dangerous, just decisive. Grandpa clicked his remote again. The hum died instantly, leaving a heavy silence full of embarrassment and corn pollen. You can go now, he said mildly. Trent didn't move right away. He stood there, staring at the rows like they'd personally betrayed him. Then, with the composure of a man realizing the HOA insurance probably didn't cover electro-horticulture, he gathered his crew and marched back toward the gate. Halfway down the lane, Cora turned and mouthed sorry at me. I gave her a half-wave. She wasn't the problem. Systems like the HOA had a way of convincing decent folks to do dumb things in khaki shorts. When the last cart disappeared around the bend, Grandpa exhaled, slow and content. You think they'll be back? I asked. He scratched his chin. Not till they run out of paperwork. He looked out across the corn, rows humming softly in the heat. Good thing about crops, he said. They don't care who's president of what. They just grow. Then he flipped the remote off, slipped it in his shirt pocket, and headed for the porch. Come on, son, he said. Let's make lemonade. We just harvested a fresh batch of entertainment. The cornfield investigation. By sunrise the next morning, Pine Hollow had gone viral, at least in the small-town sense of the word. Half the neighborhood group chat was sharing blurry photos of the electrified cornfield, while someone from the next subdivision over had uploaded a 12-second video titled, Old Man Shocks HOA Patrol, complete with dramatic thunder sound effects that definitely weren't in the original footage. When we stepped outside, Grandpa's driveway was already a parking lot. A county sedan, a pickup with Channel 8 Local Now, magnetized to the door. And behind them, Sloan Mercer's Pearl SUV. She may have been retired, but retirement, apparently, didn't cover keeping her nose out of legend. She stood beside the newswoman, gesturing like she was reenacting a hostage situation. The reporter, a young guy sweating through his dress shirt, held a microphone with the cautious hope of someone who'd been promised action. Mr. Bennett, he called as soon as Grandpa appeared on the porch. Would you mind a few words about the alleged wire trap? Grandpa sipped from his chipped mug, the one that said world's okayest woodworker, and shrugged. Alleged? Sounds fair so far. Sloan spun toward him. You deliberately electrified your crops. These poor volunteers were traumatized. Funny, Grandpa said. They looked plenty animated yesterday. That earned a snicker from the cameraman. Sloan glared daggers. A woman stepped out from the county sedan, badge, clipboard, steady eyes. Inspector Arlene Trout, she said. Same one who'd cleared him on the fence fiasco months back. Raymond, please tell me you didn't actually build another deterrent system. I did, Grandpa admitted. But this one's solar, Arlene. I'm going green. She sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. Is it lethal? Only to pride. The cameraman couldn't help it. A quiet laugh escaped before he remembered professionalism. Sloan huffed. Trout crouched, brushed some dirt off a cable, and followed it to the small junction box disguised as a birdhouse. She tapped it twice, listening for hums. Low-voltage pulse coil, grounded. That's it, Grandpa said. Safer than your average dog fence. Sloan stepped forward, waving her own phone like evidence. He ambushed them. Ma'am, Trout said flatly. Trespassing in a private property for unapproved inspection falls under County Code 14.4, agricultural privacy. Sloan blinked. Agricultural? Corn's agriculture, Trout said. And last I checked, HOA isn't law enforcement. For a moment, silence rippled across the field. The reporter cleared his throat. So, no charges? Trout straightened. None. Maybe a fine for misusing county resources. The camera lingered on Grandpa's face, calm, slightly amused, a man who'd seen enough of life to know when to let quiet win. Sloan, realizing she'd lost again, stormed off toward her SUV. The door slammed, tires spat gravel, and the sound faded into the distance. Grandpa turned to the reporter. You want the real story? He nodded eagerly. Grandpa smiled. Write this down. Respect grows best when watered by boundaries. That's the headline. The reporter grinned like he'd just found the quote of the day. By evening, the video was online. Comments poured in. Some called Grandpa a folk hero. Others called him an old menace with too much wire and free time. But the best one came from someone anonymous. Wish he'd run for mayor. Grandpa didn't reply, of course. He just watched the corn sway in the dusk breeze, faint hum gone quiet, and said, Internet fame's like dandelions, bright for a day, then all fluff. The harvest and the hum. 4 whole days after the news crew left, peace actually stuck. The corn shimmered golden in the sun. Bees hummed lazily over the tomatoes, and Grandpa Ray went about things like the world had finally remembered its manners. Then Thursday came, the day peace clocked out early. It started with a new sign at the cul-de-sac entrance. Glossy letters, HOA funded, nailed crooked into the grass. Unauthorized agriculture subject to removal. Community cleanup initiative Saturday, 8 a.m. Sounds like a raid with cupcakes, Grandpa muttered. Sure enough, Saturday dawned to the whine of engines. 3 utility trucks rolled in, Grayson Creek Improvement volunteers stenciled on the sides. The crew wore matching polos and the determined smiles of people convinced they were saving civilization from corn. And there, directing them like a field general, stood Trent Hubble, clipboard reborn, pride repaired, and vengeance in his step. Mr. Bennett, he called across the fence, today we'll be reclaiming the subdivision's visual integrity. Grandpa rose from his chair, slow as dawn. That's so. By authority of the Homeowners Council, these crops are being removed for aesthetic noncompliance. I swear, he said that without blinking. Grandpa rubbed his jaw. All right then, he said, like he was agreeing to a dance he'd been expecting. He walked toward the shed, the one that hums with secrets and smells like warm cedar, and came back holding a long metal rod and a tangle of wire that looked like something between an antenna and a fishing pole. Trent's team started unloading tools, hedge trimmers, shovels, a weed grinder the size of a small horse. Grandpa knelt by the first row and jammed the metal rod into the soil. The ground gave a small thunk like it recognized an old friend. Son, he said without looking up, flip the breaker-marked harvest mode. I did because when Grandpa uses that tone, you don't ask what it does. You just trust the engineering. A low vibration swept through the corn. Not electricity this time, resonance. Grandpa had strung the outer perimeter with copper wire that turned the field into one big natural speaker. As the frequency rose, the stalks began to sing. Soft at first, like wind through a bottle, then louder, harmonizing into a deep, eerie hum that rolled across the subdivision like the earth itself clearing its throat. The volunteers froze. Trent's weed grinder sputtered, then died completely. Birds shot from the trees. Even the air shimmered. Grandpa stood, eyes bright. Acoustic deterrent, he said. Patent pending. Trent shouted over the hum. You can't use sound. Too late, Grandpa said. Nature's got the stage. The hum rose to a crescendo, a sound that wasn't angry, but ancient, the kind that makes people realize they're smaller than they thought. One by one, the volunteers backed away, palms over their ears, retreating to the trucks. Trent was last, staring at Grandpa like he was some kind of wizard with a grudge against bureaucracy. When the last engine faded down the road, Grandpa flicked the switch off. The corn sighed, settling back into stillness. Was that safe? I asked. He grinned. Safer than silence. We spent the afternoon picking ripe tomatoes and listening to the calm settle back in. By evening, half the neighborhood had wandered over with pie, iced tea, and sheepish apologies. Even Cora from the HOA brought lemonade. No speeches this time. Just laughter, stories, and the faint hum of crickets learning the tune of peace. Later, under porch light and stars, I asked, You think they're done for good? Grandpa leaned back, eyes on the horizon. Son, folks like that don't quit. They just run out of audience. He tapped the side of his mug, listening to the echo. But that's all right, long as we stay square. The corn rustled. The LED on the fence blinked steady. And somewhere between the buzz of the summer night and Grandpa's quiet smile, Pine Hollow remembered again what it meant to live next to people instead of problems.